Hello and welcome once again to the Cash Game Locks podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. And you wrote up this article. We're talking about some cash game plays, some safe plays that also have some upside, some guys you can lock in your lineup, and the kind of guys that aren't going to kill you, barring like a torn ACL or something that you can't predict with like a Jamal Charles type. But starting off at the top, this is the guy that's probably at the top of Cash Game, GVPs, pretty much every article at quarterback, and rightfully so. Get the highest total of the week. Tom Brady in his narrative game. But narrative game aside, I mean, this is just a team that he's dominated throughout his career. And I can't fathom a scenario where the Colts keep this game close. I mean, even if Brady doesn't end up throwing the ball at all in the fourth quarter, I just feel like this game is just going to be brutal.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, with the whole narrative, I am not worried about the blowout factor in them, although they could hand it off to Blunt, and just let him run to town for the whole second half, but they're going to run up the score. I could easily see them putting up 45-plus points in this game. And that's the thing. You're going to be paying up for a high floor ceiling this week with Brady, although there are plenty of other options you could go with at quarterback. Because I do like Sam Bradford. I do like Carson Palmer. I think, you and I were both talking about Hoyer being super cheap and being a good play this week as well.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're someone who's going to be playing DeAndre Hopkins, who we'll get to. I mean, it makes sense as if you're going to go cheap, but we'll get to that in a minute here. Matt Forte, you mentioned here, tons of injuries for the Bears. Looks like Alshon Jeffrey is still questionable. It doesn't look like he's on the right side of questionable, which he hasn't been for weeks either. Now Martellus Bennett with an injury yesterday in practice, Thursday that is, and didn't practice today. So whether either of those guys go or not, hopefully they don't. And then you get Matt Forte in there against this Detroit defense that, I mean, this entire team, this is looking like, it's looking pretty brutal. And I saw the perfect jersey someone had it the other day. It showed a guy and it just said Owen as the name and then 16 as the number. And that definitely might be the case again. The Lions might be the first team ever to do it twice.
Yeah, I mean, they've just been awful, both sides of the ball. And their defense was supposed to be, pretty good despite losing Sue this season. But I mean, 25th, they ranked 25th in defense per Football Outsiders. And, I mean, hopefully Cutler can get a target to be healthy so he could throw the ball. But Forte, he's going to be the guy. I really like his price on DraftKings, 7,100. That's not bad at all, especially with the full point PPR there.
Yeah, and now you've got, even on that defense that already wasn't playing well, DeAndre Levy just came back, and now he's having hip surgery, so he's out too. So, I mean, there's really, you got Haloti Ngata, I guess, that you're worried about, but I mean, even he's just an aging lineman, so there's really nothing to worry about in that defense, and I'm loving Forte as well. Next up, Eddie Lacy, another guy we were talking about before the show, and as kind of a choice you really have to make between Eddie Lacy and Chris Ivory, who you have mentioned in your honorable mention part there, where both guys are the same price on FanDuel. Packers have a much higher team total, and I mean, quite honestly, a better matchup. Only thing is, Ivory's been more consistent, but it's not that Lacy's necessarily been bad. I mean, last week he got stuffed, but it was a tough matchup. But like you mentioned earlier, it's a guy who's been having success on the ground, over 4 yards per carry, but he just hasn't seen the ball a whole lot. So hopefully, I mean, this is the ideal matchup for that to change, though.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't been bad, but the thing is, we haven't seen the heavy workload where he's getting 25 touches a game. We haven't seen that yet this season, which is a bit odd because that was so successful last year. But I mean, if any week, it's probably going to be this week, and we get him at a pretty discount price from what we're used to seeing him at. So, I mean, I have Eddie Lacy in about every cash game lineup I have, and like you said, I mean, Chris Ivory, he's been consistent. I do rank him just a bit higher over Lacy on FanDuel.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard not to like both those guys, and I mean, if you're not paying up, I mean, I don't mind both those guys in cash game either. And you mentioned also Arian Foster, especially as heavily involved as he's been in the pass game since he's come back from his injury, and then a little bit of a scare. You thought he had a concussion, started breaking stuff on the sideline a couple of games ago, and I mean, I was breaking stuff on my own sideline when he went out of that game. But I mean, it's going to be tough if you're playing Hopkins to play him too, also in the same cash game lineup. But I mean, it's hard not to like him. I mean, he's an elite talent who's still priced a little bit below, where you would anticipate at least. So you gotta like that. And then speaking of Hopkins, the guy leads the league in just about every single category. And the only reason he leads in targets, yards per game, And the only reason he's not leading in yards is because Julio Jones has played one more game now because he already played last night. So DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, there's no way, there's nothing that could, short of Armageddon, that could keep this guy out of my cash game lineups this week.
Yeah, me either. I mean, he's been very consistent, and the price is still pretty solid for him putting up lines of elite wide receivers. He's caught 8 balls in all but one game this season. I mean, that's just impressive for this offense that really wasn't touted coming into the season, but they are, they have some decent offensive players and weapons on this team. 2 bad defenses. I mean, I think there's going to be that 43 over-under is, I mean, pretty low in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because Josh and I were talking on the GPP podcast about how last week Jaguars and Buccaneers had a 41-point total, ended up going almost 70 points. And I mean, obviously this one's very unlikely to go to 70, but I just don't see any way there's the under hits in this game because neither defense is good, like you said, and both offenses. I mean, now that Hoyer's back under center and Mallett's on the sideline crying instead of pretending to produce, then we definitely have potential for some fireworks, and I think it's like a sneaky source of value almost because people kind of look away at that low total. The other side of this game, coincidentally, on this next one, Allen Robinson from the Jaguars looked like Blake Bortles was he was questionable earlier in the week. Now he's up to probable. Looks like he's fine to go. TJ Yeldon, as you mentioned here, is the guy that could really just add to the value of guys like Robinson and Hearns here because he looks like if anyone's going to sit out this game, it's going to be him. Yeah,
I mean, he didn't practice today. Still like a true game time decision, but I don't know. I can't see him playing actually if he hasn't practiced all week. But I mean, Allen Robinson continues to be at a nice price and putting up monster lines, a few weeks this season. And I mean, these defenses are just horrendous, especially the secondary. So I expect this one to be a shootout back and forth. So why not grab the wide receiver 1 from each team here?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense there. And then next guy, hopefully this is no surprise to you here. Tom Brady's best friend. I mean, I don't know. They look like they're best friends. But Rob Gronkowski, same old story we already talked about here. And it's a guy who, if you look, I feel like a lot of people have mentioned looking at his recent games against the Colts and seeing that his last 2 games, like he scored a touchdown each one, but yardage numbers weren't great. But I mean, if you look at the game flow of those, the last game was a 38-point game. He got his touchdown. Why continue to throw the ball to Rob Gronkowski if you're up by 38 points? But like you mentioned earlier, you're not really worried about the blowout in this game, this Sunday. And, we've seen it from the Patriots before. If there's someone they don't like or someone they want to make a statement towards, they don't feel bad about your feelings. They'll go ahead and put up 50 points on you.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that from Gronk before. I mean, the guy's ceiling is just stupid high. I mean, it's ridiculous. He's so high from, the other tight ends in this position. And like I said, the Vegas Pats are the top team. It's pretty hard to argue against any of their plays. It's just a matter of spreading them out. I'm not loading up on the Pats by any means. But by far, Gronkowski's probably my favorite Patriots play this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to need to get yourself some shares somewhere. And then the other guy you have mentioned here, Tyler Eifert, having his breakout season here. 2 touchdowns last week against the Seahawks. Now he gets a Bills defense that has been stout against the run, not very good against the pass. Now they're missing Aaron Williams, who's going to be out for extended amount of time. All that matters to Eifert is this week. And, I mean, he's been a really tough cover for anyone. And now that secondary is banged up. So I'm with you there. I expect Eifert to have himself a pretty big game again.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone's coming close to Gronk numbers, it's probably going to be Eifert this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely, he's a beast. Next up, looking at defense, and defenses have been key, especially in FanDuel draft games or cash games the last couple weeks here, where we've seen, teams like the Broncos going off for 20-plus points. And last week, I was one of the guilty parties who had the Giants, and you're down by 3 touchdowns, well, 3.5 touchdowns, really, just at your defense position by not paying up to an actual elite unit. And you got the Jets mentioned here as your top unit. And I mean, this is a team that gets to the quarterback. They've got a great front 7, and they're facing a team that has really struggled to run the ball. And they turn the ball over a ton. I mean, Kirk Cousins makes a lot of mistakes, and the Jets are a very opportunistic team that likes to force those mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Jets. I mean, they're tied for second in the league with Philadelphia with 13 takeaways there. Washington has one of the lowest totals on the week, and I would even probably take the under there at 17 points. I can't see Kirk Cousins putting up, more than 20 points there. And, I think on FanDuel you're looking at the Broncos and Jets. It's a pretty close call. Only 200 more with Denver, so you likely go them. But on a site like DraftKings, where there's 700 or 800 bucks in between the two, I'm leaning just a little bit more towards the Jets there. If I need to pay up elsewhere.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, both of them have really nice high floors, which is what you need. Things like pick sixes and all that are all well and good, and you hope you get those. But all you can really do is put your defense in a good spot with that high floor from sacks, maybe some turnovers, and hopefully they turn into a big one. And then last up, you have mentioned as your other honorable mention there, the Seattle Seahawks against Carolina. I mean, this is a scenario where the only weakness for the Seattle defense is tight ends, and that's really the only reliable target that the Panthers have. But if I'm the Seahawks, I go ahead and just focus on taking Greg Olsen out of this game and say, if you want to throw to Ted Ginn against Richard Sherman, good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle's just a different animal at home. And I'm taking a look at that. Cam Newton, not the most accurate quarterback in the world by any means. And, his early season success has been more of a product of, the schedule. He played a lot of week in division games, so I'm not a fan of them going on the road and scoring a ton of points.
No, not at all there. I'm with you. And that's going to wrap things up here for the Cash Game Locks. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Got a lot of other great content covering every position in NFL for Week 6. And very, very, very soon, NBA content as well. So make sure to check that out.